The wind howled through the dense forest as I stood in the fire lookout tower, scanning the horizon for any signs of smoke. The isolation of the mountains was both beautiful and terrifying, an untouched wilderness that stretched for miles. It was my second week on duty, and despite the serenity of the landscape, unease clung to me like a heavy fog. I first noticed him just past noon, a lone figure walking along the edge of the tree line. Dressed in dark clothes, he moved deliberately but never seemed to look up at the tower. My gut instinct screamed for caution. Visitors were rare this deep into the backcountry, and those who did come were usually fellow rangers. The man disappeared into the trees, and I tried to shake off the uneasy feeling. But that night, just as I was preparing to sleep, the radio crackled. "Hello? Anyone out there?" The voice was rough, unfamiliar. I debated whether to respond, but decided against it. My training had been clear. Radio silence was crucial unless it was an emergency. Minutes later, I heard footsteps below the tower. My heart raced as I peered through the window. The same man stood at the base looking up at me. "Hey, can you help me? I got lost out here," he shouted. I grabbed the radio and called for backup, but the signal was weak. The man circled the tower, his movements slow and deliberate. "I'll just camp out here tonight," he said, his voice carrying an unsettling tone. "Don't worry about me." I locked the door and kept my taser within reach. The night stretched on, every sound amplified by the stillness. When morning finally came, the man was gone, but his presence lingered like a shadow over my thoughts. The experience taught me a valuable lesson. Trust your instincts and always stay prepared. Out here, the wilderness isn't the only danger. It started with smoke, a thin, unnatural column rising from the forest like a signal to something unseen. Fires weren't uncommon during the dry season, but this one felt wrong. There had been no storms, no campers. The woods were quiet, too quiet. "Control, this is Tower 7, I radioed, my voice steady despite the chill creeping up my spine. "I've spotted smoke roughly 5 miles southeast, requesting confirmation of any prescribed burns or reported activity." "Negative, Tower 7, came the reply. "No authorized burns today, keep us posted." As the minutes passed, the smoke thickened, twisting in eerie spirals as if beckoning something toward it. I grabbed my binoculars and focused on the fire's origin. My pulse quickened. There was a figure near the blaze. At first I thought it was a firefighter who had arrived early, but the movements were off, erratic. The person wasn't trying to put the fire out, they were feeding it. Branches and debris were thrown onto the flames with deliberate fury. The figure circled the fire, head tilted unnaturally as if lost in some feverish trance. "Control," I said, my voice low. "I've got a possible arsonist on site. They're fueling the fire." "Tower 7, clarify. Are you certain?" Static crackled over the line. "Authorities en route. Maintain visual but do not engage." Before I could respond, the figure froze and slowly turned their head toward me, as though they could see me from miles away. Despite the distance, I felt their gaze pierce through the trees and directly into my tower. My hands trembled as I adjusted the binoculars. The face staring back at me was partially obscured by soot, but what I could see was twisted into a grin far too wide to be human. Then, without warning, they sprinted into the dense forest, disappearing as quickly as they had appeared. The firefighting crew arrived within the hour, but the fire had already spread further than anticipated. The strange figure was nowhere to be found. Over the next few nights, more fires erupted in seemingly random places, always in remote areas I could barely see from the tower. Each time I spotted fleeting glimpses of that figure moving through the smoke like a ghost, their laughter faint but unmistakable over the crackling flames. The authorities finally apprehended someone, a drifter with a history of violence and an obsession with fire. But deep down, I knew it wasn't the same person I had seen. The one I saw still lingered in the shadows of the forest, feeding flames born of something older and far darker than mere malice. Even now, when the night is still and the wind carries the scent of ash, I swear I hear that laughter echoing through the trees. And I wonder if the fire was ever truly extinguished, or if it's simply waiting to rise again. It was my final night before the end of my 2-month rotation. The relief of going home was tempered by the eerie quietness of the forest, a silence that seemed heavier than usual. I sat by the window, sipping coffee and listening to the faint hum of the radio, waiting for morning. Just after midnight, movement caught my eye. A figure stood at the edge of the clearing, half obscured by shadows. They didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, watching the tower. My stomach twisted. I turned off the interior lights, plunging the room into darkness, and grabbed my binoculars. The figure was dressed in dark clothing, a hood concealing most of their face. They were unnervingly still, as if they were part of the forest itself. "Control, this is Tower 9, I whispered into the radio. "I've got an unknown individual at the clearing, watching the tower, requesting immediate assistance." "Tower 9, we copy," came the reply. "Backup is en route. Lock down and remain inside. Do not engage." I secured the locks and sat by the window, heart pounding. The figure didn't move. For hours they remained rooted in place, their presence a constant weight on my nerves. Then, without warning, they turned and melted into the darkness of the trees, leaving the clearing empty and unnervingly quiet. When the backup team arrived, I met them at the base of the tower. "There was someone here," I said, my voice trembling. "They were watching me." The rangers combed the area, but there were no signs of the intruder, no footprints, no broken branches, nothing to suggest anyone had been there at all. "Are you sure you saw someone?" one of the rangers asked, a mix of skepticism and concern in their tone. "I'm sure," I replied firmly. "They were real. They were watching." The ranger exchanged a glance with his partner before nodding grimly. "You're not the first to report something like this. And you won't be the last." "What do you mean?" I pressed, my voice unsteady. "Fire lookouts across the region have been reporting similar encounters for decades," he said. "Always a lone figure, always watching. Some think it's just the isolation messing with people's minds. Others think it's something older, tied to the forest itself." I didn't sleep that night, and when the sun finally rose, I left the tower for good. But the memory of that figure still haunts me, a dark silhouette etched into my mind. Months later, I stumbled across an old journal left behind by a previous fire lookout. Scribbled in the margins was a single chilling line: "The watcher is patient. The watcher always returns." These stories remind us of the hidden dangers in the wilderness. For those who choose to live there, the line between safety and danger is dangerously thin. Once the wilderness has you, there's no telling if you'll ever escape.